Crystal Palace on Saturday, as you know, Steve. I asked Robbie this. This has got to be a game you targeted as one that's winnable.
Well, apart from Crystal Palace last year, the teams that we did very well against are the ones that were in and around us. It's very difficult to take something off the top teams. If you do, then it's a bonus. You always give it your best shot, of course you do. And Crystal Palace will be looking at just like what we do, that it's a really, no disrespect, but you've got more chance of taking something off Crystal Palace than you have of Man City last week. So it is a game where we've got an outstanding chance. They did the double over us last year, which, didn't go well at the time, but certainly under Neil and his experience, there's nothing much has changed. The way they've played certainly not changed, and they've brought a 1 or 2 on deadline day to strengthen them, and they're a very good side. As we've seen, they've put back-to-back wins together, and there'll be a stern challenge.
Where will the game be won and lost then?
Well, as always in the Premier League, it's I always say it's always difficult to score. And we've got to find that resilience back. What made us very difficult to beat last year. We've scored goals in each of our last 3, 4, 5 games, and not being able to win, which is a huge blow to us. But in all of these games, I'm sure it's going to be tight. Crystal Palace looked as if they give not much away. So it's a typical Premier League game where you see week in and week out that every team's got good players. We've all got good players, and it'll be tight. Let's hope the best team wins.
You mentioned Neil Warnock. He's been very complimentary about you, saying you were head and shoulders above everybody else last season. Mind games just before the beginning.
Oh yeah, that's Well, that's very, very kind of him. And no, Neil's Neil's record speaks for itself, doesn't it? He's an experienced Premier League manager who's took over them and straight away just steadied the ship. He's got a tough act to follow in Tony, but he seems to be taking to it and seems to be enjoying it. And I'll buy him a glass of red, or I'll give him a glass of red. But the mind games have started, have they? Very good.
Now, Alan McGregor, straightforward swap, and how's the rest of the squad shaping up Saturday?
Everybody's okay. We're okay. We're a tad disappointed that the points total hasn't really been bigger a little bit. We've got ourselves in some wonderful positions over the last couple of weeks. It hasn't quite happened, but overall we've played 6 games, and if we can win on Saturday, then 9 points from 7 games. 9 points from 7 games is a decent return, and it could have been a little bit more, but that's what we're looking for.
Sonny Luca, can he feature? Played well in midweek.
He did play well in midweek. Shawnee, we've been careful with his injury problems he's had over the last 18 months. He's had a good pre-season, and of course, with the arrival of Jelavic and Hernandez in particular, but certainly he's added to the squad. And as I've said to all of them, we've only just started. They've only just started in a long campaign, and certainly Aluko will certainly play his part.
You mentioned if you do win, it's 9 points from 7, so it changes the complexion at the start of the season. International break, and then Arsenal-Liverpool. It's relentless.
That's what the Premier League is. We knew we had Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City. We had 3 out the top 5, 6 within a short period of time. But all the cliches come out. We've got to play them sometime. So it's always difficult. I always find when it's international duty, because it would be lovely to do a week's preparation leading up to it. However, it looks as if we've got 15 players away on international duty. So it says you how difficult it's going to be. But let's get over Crystal Palace first, and let's hope they'll come back from international duty all ready to go.
Just finally on the internationals, you must welcome that your players are going. You would have wanted to play a lot more for England. You must welcome your players going out to international duty. But of course, the downside is injuries in that long campaign.
Well, it is, and we've got players travelling a long distance away too. That's always the disadvantage of signing South American players and African players. That unfortunately, when they do get picked, they've got to travel a long distance. So it's something which is always a bugbear of all of us. But if you are a Premier League team, then you would expect to have internationals. And as I said, we've got probably 15 away, which shows you how far we've come in a short period of time.
6 points from 6 games, 16th in the table. Are you a manager that takes a great deal of notice of the table? Some managers don't even bother until 10 games in.
Well, I mean, you always have a glance. I mean, usually if you're level par like we are, then you're not really ever in any much trouble. You know, it's when you're below points, games played and points you've got, and you haven't quite achieved that level performance and an amount of points. But it will be a great start if we beat Crystal Palace on Saturday. That's how fine it is. But we've only just started, and really we're a bit disappointed. But when I analyse the 5-6 games we have played, you know, we were disappointing against Aston Villa, granted, but we played Stoke here a few weeks ago with 10 men for 80 minutes. We're 2-0 up at Newcastle. We're 2-1 up against West Ham, a very good West Ham team. So we're just a little bit disappointed that we haven't got 3-4 more points on the board. But I think most Premier League managers would probably say the same, because the margins, as we know, are so small.
When the goals aren't going in, I guess your strikers can practice on the training ground. When you're conceding 13-5, how do you, as a former centre-half...
Well, we built 2 years of getting out the Championship, and all last year on an organisation amongst us to be difficult to beat and difficult to play against. And I think we haven't got to go away from that. And when we do analyse it, we have to say, well, maybe we are a bit too open. And for instance, we've got really 2 attacking fullbacks in Robertson and El Mohammadi, which is the norm these days, I have to tell you. But maybe we have to, find that resilience again and that organisation again, to stop the goals going in, because we can't expect to score 3 goals every week to win a game in the Premier League. So we have to find that back. We've had it in abundance for a couple of years, and we've let ourselves down over the last month. A lot of it, I have to tell you, is individual error. For that, there's nothing you can nothing as a coach or a manager to deal with individual error. You hope that they don't keep making that individual error, and if they do, then you've got to change the personnel rather than the structure of the team.
But how do you deal with that? Do you deal with it? Is it DVD analysis? Do you get?
Well, we do all of it. We do all the DVD analysis. I don't think, the one thing you don't want to do is analyse people's glaring mistakes. They know. If you've made a mistake, and a glaring mistake, then you know straight away. You don't have to analyse that. But certainly the way the team and the gaps between you and all the technical stuff, yes, we have video analysis, and we have work on the training ground, which we've worked this morning, and video analysis today as we speak, as we're doing it. So there won't be anything unturned to make sure that we get back to what's been successful for us, which is that ability to keep a clean sheet.
And I know it's only early October, but when you look at the next games against Arsenal, Liverpool, Southampton, does that just put a little bit more pressure on this home game?
Well, I think of my experience of playing in the Premier League, that there's always a pressure on all the time. Round the corner's always one of the big boys, and if you get a run together where you're playing 3-4 of the big teams all together, then it's difficult to accumulate points in that particular month or 5 weeks or what it is. So, as I've said repeatedly, it's trenches of the season you look at. The first 10 games, can we get 10, 12 points? Last year, we averaged 10, 12 points per quarter of the season, which was always enough to keep us comfortably in the middle of the table.
And when you lose Alan McGregor, but you're somebody like Steve Harper to come in straight away, that must be a huge bit of reassurance.
Well, Harper will give us that experience which we seen last year. He came to the fray and did fantastically well for us. And I wish he was a few years younger, and I'm sure he does too. But certainly with his experience and his know-how, and he's a good goalkeeper, a very, very good goalkeeper. So that's not an issue.
What exactly is Alan's problem, and why is it keeping him out a month or so?
It's a shoulder injury, and we're just delighted that he doesn't need an operation, because we first thought that maybe it was too loose and maybe it was going to need an operation. Thankfully, that's not the case. So the specialist has said we need to rest and stop diving on it. As you can imagine, if you've got a sore shoulder and he's diving on it every day, then we've got to take him out, see if it recovers, make sure it recovers, and hopefully in 4 to 6 weeks he'll be back to normal.